talk to you guys about nutrition. He's just like Stephanie and Chris, he works with the Sport Institute. And his background is nutrition, obviously. So he's going to spend some time talking with you guys about your nutritional needs, I guess. So, all yours there.
Hey guys, how's today going?
Great.
Recovery day?
Yeah.
You guys had more training and conditioning yesterday?
Yeah.
I can go complete team. I apologize for being here. It's a little tricky. I'm trying to find a way to balance it. Is anyone going to lose their mind if this isn't so smart? Maybe it's just me. We're at the wing again. I tried. You tried? Yeah. This is not like So anyways, we're going to kind of roll with this, see what happens. So anyways, today what we're going to be looking at is just in terms of principle, how you want to actually manage your nutrition. So anyone here feeling incredibly confident running their nutrition over the week? And I'll look at nutrition in two ways. There's feed to train and there's feed to win. They're very different. You guys have a feed to train and a feed to win strategy? You guys like to feed the two? So would you be able to feed the same way on a training day than you would on a competition day? No. So you should have two different strategies. Now as far as feed to train, what do you guys think about when, or if at all, do you guys plan out what exactly the nutrition will kind of shape like? What things you want to keep as part of the nutrition from a strategy perspective, and what part you don't care so much about? And think about the or the sessions you had. Like, have you had nutrition sessions before?
Yeah. Not very in-depth.
So let's say, show of hands, like you had some person talking about nutrition. What were the key messages you guys were talking about? Protein? Okay. Anything else?
Carbs.
Okay. Anything else?
Just drink water.
Drink water. So you got the trinity going. So what's the news with the protein? What do you want to do with it?
After, sort of more for recovery.
Yep. And so, like, technically, why does all that stuff matter? Let me play devil's advocate. Why do you want to care about that stuff? Why do you want to master that stuff?
Your body's a machine.
To a degree. Basically, you're looking for control. As an athlete, there's certain things you can control, there's certain things you can't. You can't control your body if you want to. You can't control the schedule. The schedule will control you, but you can control how you deal with the schedule, whether it's training, rest, and you can control how your body reacts to those rests and the training. So who gets better faster from an athlete? Like if you had like 10 athletes line up, and you get them to go and see how they develop. Who's going to be the one that's going to win the race? Whether it's development, volleyball, or combat fighting, or racing, whatever. Like what's the general gist? Who's going to win that battle? What do they have to do to beat everyone else? Think of it from a training. What do they have to do in training to kick everyone's butt?
Train harder.
Yeah. How do you train harder if you don't know how to push your body to deal with the training go harder? And not only that, if you train, is that stress or is that nurturing the body?
Stress.
Stress. So what else does that person who has to win and beat everyone else has to do really well? They have to train deep, dig deep, and then do else. Yeah, you gotta manage your recovery. And if you manage your recovery and you dig deep in training, what happens to the body? Think of it as like an organism. If you put a stress in front of an animal and you nurture it after the fact, do they adapt? Or do they not adapt? They adapt. That's essentially what your body does. So when you weight lift, let's keep it super simple. Do you guys weight lift?
Yeah.
What are you doing with that? How? When you lift weights, what's happening to the muscle? You're nurturing it or breaking it? You're tearing it. Yeah, you're breaking it. What are you supposed to do before, and how long after do you actually do your next weight session? Is it a day? 2 days? All hours? Yeah, that's your recovery window. So what do you guys do to actually enhance the adaptation to that training?
Roll out.
What's that?
Roll out.
Yeah, but that doesn't make your muscle bigger. So what do you do to make your muscle bigger between, how?
How do you do?
Yeah, to make the muscle bigger. How do you do it?
Right after
No, you're on the right track, but there's more to it. So for example, when you do a weight, like when was the last time you guys did weightlifting?
Wednesday?
Wednesday? So when you did weightlifting on Wednesday or Thursday, you know how long that stimulus lasts? Where the muscle is just like firing up and building faster than it normally does? You guys know how long? 48 hours. So that means you can manipulate your nutrition 48 hours to make the muscle grow faster than someone who does not know. And that's how you get faster, bigger, stronger, faster. Because everyone has like what? How many years do you have to make the national team? Give or take. 4 years?
Yeah.
4 of them. So basically it's an arms race. Who's going to get to the 4th year faster than the other? Right? So it's how you manage your time. And nutrition can do that if you know how to control it to get the most out of the training. Because you guys are technically going to be training the same amount of time, roughly, but yet you need to be faster and develop faster than the other guy. So in terms of nutrition, that's kind of the theme how you want to look at it. That's tactical nutrition. But we're going to talk about things you heard before and just reshape it so you have a different perspective on it. So the first thing we want to highlight with sports nutrition is that you have a variety of fields, I guess, to master. There's a balanced diet field, there's a sports foods field, and then there's a supplement field. Now some people have their focus flipped one way versus the other. When people don't know any better, they tend to focus on this, or at least that's how the marketing works. Who here uses sports supplements? Quite a few would. And why do you use it? What kind of products are you using and why?
I have carbohydrate and protein for like after.
Okay. Anyone else? Someone else raise their hand? Is it the same thing or you guys use a different thing? Same. Anyone else use a different product?
Creatine.
Okay. And when do you use that?
Sometimes before a workout.
Okay. What are you looking to do with it?
Like, it gives you different energy. Sometimes because like it puts the water into your
You feeling unsure?
pardon?
You feeling unsure?
Yeah.
It's all good, it's all good. I'll let you know after, I'll let you know. But that's the idea. When you're using a product, you're either trying to drive quality in the training, enhance the recovery between the training, or you're amplifying adaptation. If you don't know what that product is doing, then you may not be using that product properly. Same thing with normal food. Should you be eating 2 pieces of steak or 1 piece of steak? That's up. I don't know. You guys tell me. You guys will be able to tell me at the end of the session, but that's generally the conversation you want to have. So ideally, this is the kind of where the science is pointing, where you have a heavy load of focus and tactical detail on the balanced diet part, followed by filling gaps with sports food. And then when the time is right, you can use sports supplements in a way to help amplify everything else based on the philosophy I told you. So for example, if you look at the balanced diet, are you using it in a tactical way? In a feed to train scenario or in a feed to win scenario? Who's here does not know that? If you raised your hand. If you have any gaps. Like, do you now, like based on how we're talking, do you feel you're not as confident about your feed to train or your feed to win protocol based on how you set this up? Perfect. But we'll figure that out in the next like 30 minutes. So the things you want to know for that whole base, make sure you're feeding for the energy of the workout. Make sure you're refueling and rehydrating. These are things you heard before. I bet you guys could probably tell me this stuff in your sleep. Is there anything that you read here that's not surprising? Did you guys hear all this before? For the most part? Okay. So let's get into something a little bit more personal in the sense of how you set things up. We can break it down so that by the end of like the hour, you're a few steps closer to know how to like be a little bit more tactical with your nutrition. So what I want you guys to do, just to kind of get the exercise rolling, is to think about what you actually ate yesterday from the time you woke up to the time you slept. In terms of a time range, don't be super specific on the time, but say, hey, between 11 and 12, just write 11 and 12. If you snack somewhere between 1 and 1:30, just write that. I'll give you guys some pens if you don't have it. And then essentially what we're going to do is we're going to break down how you eat from a protein and carbohydrate perspective, and then we can look at it from a supplement perspective. Let me know if one doesn't work. Not the greatest pens. That's what. Everyone else here have a pen? Now, don't worry about the portion size yet. Just write down the stuff you actually had with you. If you had a sports food or a drink, put that under the extra column on the far right, just so that you don't forget it. And we'll deal with that afterwards. I'll give you like 5 minutes to kind of rim through this. So the reason why you want to do this exercise is if you want to know where you're going to go with your nutrition, you have to kind of know where you came from. So if you don't fully understand where your gaps are, you're always going to make a mistake over and over and over again. And you'll never evolve from a nutrition perspective. And then your opponent will, and they'll just get an advantage over you.
Skip this one. Which was like 2 hours. What's it? Today was
Now in a couple of minutes, which should probably be around lunchtime, and then what I'll do is I'll ask you guys to start putting kind of portion size based on certain metrics, so I'll deal with that later. But just try to remember the variety of stuff that you had. And don't worry about the other columns like grain, fruit, and all that stuff. Worry about that later.
It was like 7:30.
And if you don't remember the specifics, just think like I had a meat, and I had like a pasta, or like just keep it generic, as long as you can remember the general framework.
You're in my that makes me feel so bad.
I know what I mean.
So you just observe.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Sorry, so when you guys, if you guys are around supper, this is how I want you guys to start kind of marking your portions. For meat specifically, use your cell phone. Like how many units of this size of meat did you have? So if you had like meat that's about 2 cell phones, wide, long, and thick, then just write 1 or 2 or whatever next to it. Yeah, just right next to the actual meat item. Now if you're looking at carbohydrates like grains, potatoes, fruit, or veggies, how many fists of servings did you have? So if you had like a scoop of rice, how big was it compared to your fist? So your fist is roughly a cup, give or take. So just write that number next to the food, and then we'll circle back and look at the actual amount of nutrition you ate and see if it actually matches. Good? Did you make it from scratch? So you have to count how many stuff did you put in it. That was it like yogurt.
You made yogurt all by yourself at the farm.
Wait, you write the serving size. So serving size on the side?
Yeah, just put the number next to it, so like,
So wait, like,
yeah. No, it's just next to it.
So do we do it for everything?
Don't worry about that. Yeah, we're not there yet. Yeah, you just want to know roughly how much. So again, cell phone for me, fist for everything else.
Yeah,
Vegetables.
Wait, repeat that. One phone or meat? Yeah, like how many cell phones of meat did you have? Like, like that's one serving? Yeah. Two.
That's interesting there.
Alright, so we got 20 seconds just to finish off.
It's like the only thing I can do.
I put two. Actually, put it three. Alright. So I'm assuming you guys are nearly done at this point? Ish? Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to break down how you eat, and we're going to look at it from two different conversations. We're going to look at it from a protein conversation, and we'll look at it from a carbohydrate conversation. So we'll start with the carbohydrate part, because that's going to vary from one athlete to another, even on the same squat. So in terms of the function of carbohydrate, it provides a good source of energy, particularly for the muscle to do work, but carbohydrate can do other things. So in terms of source of the carbohydrates, what comes to mind from what you guys remember last? Like where would you get carbs if you need pasta? Yeah. Anywhere else? Okay. Yeah. Most of it. Most of it. Yeah, that's most of it. It's pretty good. And as far as those items that you listed, is the chemistry of those foods all like exactly the same, or are they very different? So sometimes you can have some types of carbohydrates that can do other functions. So you could literally control how much your bowels actually operate. And that's just based on controlling how much you eat and what type of stuff you eat. Now in terms of this type of food here, which foods here could you actually use for protein and also give you carbohydrate at the same time? Yep. Anything else?
What's in top left?
Top left, that's oatmeal, rice, Greek yogurt, and then fruit and pasta. That was one of those. Mac and cheese.
That's full.
So here's an example of where you can get carbohydrates to fill up those muscles, but then at the same time, you can potentially look at pushing recovery if that's what you want to do, depending on how you want to control the body to react after the training. Now, if you look at, let's say, a day of an athlete where you're not training, the training day is like it's a rest day. This is generally how a plate may look, generally speaking. It really depends on the nuances of like what you're doing during the year. But essentially you have what, like a cell phone size of 8 in the corner, maybe like a fistful of whole grains, and then like a whole rack load of just fruit and veggies because you're not training a lot. You'll need a massive amount of carbohydrates on those types of things. So what do you think will happen if you just, let's say, injected a team practice or a weight session? What part of that would you actually adjust if this was your lunch or your supper and training happened just before that meal? So I'm assuming, let's look at supper times. You're probably going to practice somewhere between 4 and 6, I guess, for the most part. So where would you adjust that plate? If you had to control the reaction that you're going to do after the workout? Maybe. Anything else?
More protein and carbs.
So why would you need more protein and why would you need more carbs? So do you need more or do you need some? Exactly. Does anyone know what's the dose? What's the maximum dose your body can handle?
What is it?
20-25 grams of protein. That's all your body can react to in one shot. Does anyone know how much food is 20 grams, 25 grams of protein? Like a meat.
Chicken breast?
Yeah. How big is a chicken breast? Boom. Size of your phone. So when you cook that chicken breast and you get all the water out, it shrinks down to around this size. That's 20-25 grams of protein. That's all your body can react to in one shot. Maybe there's an exception if you're 130 kilos with like 3% body fat, like a rugby player. But otherwise, you, me, no matter how big or tall we are, we only react to this much. So when you say you need to have extra protein, maybe you do, but it's not going to be right after the workout, assuming this is what you've had all the time, that the cell phone work. So you just make sure that meets there. So what else would change? You said carbohydrates? So let's look at how much. Just a little bit. Maybe an extra fist. Keeping still like a nice balance right throughout. Maybe drizzle in a little bit more oil if the training was high. But we're just talking about mild shifts. Now there's some exceptions to the rule where, let's say, if training is much higher. So for example, do any of you guys play different sports while playing bowling?
Ultimate.
Basketball too? Anyone else? You guys are tall. I'm assuming some of you guys get recruited for people. Yeah, basketball. Is the training load high? You're running, scrimmaging, a lot of aerobics and anaerobic, jumping. The training load's up. So although from a volleyball pure perspective, like from a training, you might balance on the first plate and the other plate. But if you're balancing other sports where the load is even higher, then some days you may actually have to do this. Where you have way more carbohydrate at the top and you just choke out the veggies a bit so you can make it. But you notice what stays the same? Fruit. Why does it stay the same? Reason. This is actually the poster they use at the 2012 Olympic Games for the U.S. Olympic Committee. So all the athletes saw this just to remind them how to eat during different training phases while they were getting ready for the Olympic matches. So that's it. So in terms of controlling, you do it this way, you'll control the muscle just fine because now you know how the muscle works. You're going to control how the muscle reacts to the training and recovers because now you're fueling and adjusting the plate the way you want to. That's how you control it. That's how you control your body. That's how you control how you react to the training. So before we go to the protein stuff, let's look at how much carbohydrate you guys had at breakfast, lunch, and at supper. Now as far as variety goes, because at the same time you're balancing tactical nutrition with healthy nutrition. Sometimes the two worlds are a little different, but you have to try to blend them the best you can sometimes. So yesterday, you guys trained a little bit more than today. So you'd expect to have a little bit more carbohydrate to deal with the training demands yesterday. So what did you guys typically selected for breakfast? Like what was available for you? So what we'll do, we'll grab one here, one guy here, one guy here.
I was at home, so I still had like a homemade egg muffin.
Okay.
Cheese on
Cool. What kind of training was scheduled in the morning yesterday? More skill-based? Or?
it. We had a blocking defense.
Okay. Was it like pretty active? Like was it like a conditioning session or was it more just
Low
total?
impact.
Low impact. Anyone here? I'll make you guys into groups.
Spinach and cheese on it.
Okay, so you had some protein. Anything to kind of fuel you up for that low impact session? Whether it's fruit, sliced bread, yogurt, anything? Okay, so, but you see what I'm saying? Now that you're looking at it, you're like, oh yeah, all right, well, what does carbohydrate do? Let me stop by asking that. It fuels the muscle, right? But what happens, how could you make a low impact practice crappy?
Being tired.
Yeah. But what kind of tired though? It's not muscle tired.
Lazy.
Yeah. It's called central drive fatigue. It's neuro fatigue. Aside from the muscle, you guys have taken biology before? What system asks for carbohydrate in large amounts?
Nervous. Pancreatic.
It does, it's living. But what's the biggest one? Who said it?
Nervous system.
The nervous system. Huge. What happens when your blood sugars go down? Like if you're diabetic, their blood sugars go down. Wow. Shut down. It's because the central nervous system really needs carbohydrates really bad. So if you're actually doing like a small drill, do you need to have a lot of carbohydrates? No, but you need some. So what would be fair? You said you had an English muffin.
With egg muffin.
Yeah. So how would you do it in a different way? Like keep your omelet. Like what would you do to switch that up? Again, you're trying to control for central drive fatigue to get quality out of that water product. So like what would you do if you had to just wing it? Yeah. Anyone here? Anyone did something different for breakfast than milk than this too? Anyone had just cereal and milk? All right.
Cool.
So how many fifths?
Or 2 fistfuls of cereal,
How much more?
a fistful.
Yeah, about that, it's fine. If anything, you could probably ramp up the milk just to get a nice 20-gram protein hit. Because 1 cup of milk is about half a chicken breast. 2 cups of milk is like a chicken breast of protein. So you probably get a nice muscle hit just by adding a little bit more milk, and you have a little bit more carbohydrate to drive through that morning practice session. That's it. So in terms of protein, because now we're talking about that a little bit. So we know the impacts on the muscle. It's used to make a bunch of other things in the body, like enzymes and hormones. Athletes for sure need a little more. Do you guys know how much protein you need to have?
125.
How would you know that? How do you do the math on
Just guess.
There's a number per pound.
that? Yeah, per pound or per kilo or something like that. So like, let's say for example, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what it is.
Okay, so anyone feel comfortable giving me the value?
175.
All right, so we're almost the same way. So on the high end of the scale, protein is a range. It's not a specific number, it's like a range. So roughly in his case, maybe 120, 150, his size. So if you broke that down to 20 hits of protein, that's like around 5, 6 protein hits there. How many protein hits did you have yesterday? And 1 hit is 20 grams. So it's a cell phone of meat, or 2 fists of milk, or a fistful of Greek yogurt. That's a hit, right? 5 hits. All spread out, or did you find you stacked it in one meal? Okay, good.
Breakfast. Wait. How many was, like, do you need for,
Usually for guys your size, I would see no less than 5. 5 to 6 hits, protein hits. Just because you're larger humans compared to, let's say, a gymnast or something. So if you're looking for like that maximum hit, again, you're going 20, 25, and because of your size, mathematically that's looking like at least 5, 6 hits a day. So you have 3 down with your meals, and you have to find 3 other spots somewhere between the meals. So how many here had less than 4? If you look at your mapping. So just show of hands. Everyone had more than 4?
I have 4.
4? Yeah, so if you had 4, just need a couple chickens. Now you have to figure out where you're going to do it. Now in terms of how much protein you get, kind of look at it from a cell phone perspective. This is just a quick list. And I'll PDF you the slides so that you got it right. But this is just to show you that you can get protein from a variety of things. These are kind of like your animal based. So in terms of just getting like, let's say half a hit of protein, this is the amount of food you would have to eat. So this is kind of like 2 little breakaway yogurts. That's just about a piece of cheese. It's about the length of your finger and your middle finger put together. A cup of milk is about a fist, 2 eggs, and half of a cell phone. I'll roughly give you 10 grams. But you can even get it from plant sources as well. So if you're eating that with a couple of cups of pasta, then you're also sneaking in more protein, mostly from the vegetable stuff. So you're not just getting it from the meat, you're kind of getting it from there. So in terms of, if you had like the egg white, and you wanted carbohydrate, but also want a little more protein, then you have a couple slices of bread with it. Get a little more protein on top of that, and also get the carbs with it. Kind of match with the rest. Now in terms of fat, still important to have, and if you'll notice on the graph really didn't have like a specific section on fat except for the spoons on the side, so you just need to use a little bit with the meals, not a whole amount of it. But essentially, getting access to vitamins, essential nutrients are important. Sources of fat are still kind of the same as they were probably like you heard last, through those sources like olive oil, avocado, and canola, as well as omega-3 rich fishes like salmon. And as far as getting access to fruits and vegetables like you saw on that plate where it gets adjusted, that's just to help, obviously, to get more vitamins and minerals as well as other functions, nutrients for immune function and recovery. Ideally, if you're hitting this, 5 serves per day of both veggies, that's like about 3 fists. It's like a serving of veggies. So if you're averaging around that between your 2 meals, like lunch and supper, you're pretty much in a good space. Questions so far? All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna analyze exactly what you did. So first thing I want you guys to do is write down at the very top how many protein hits you did. And I'm just gonna do a quick peek around to see what the average is. Because essentially you want to see is if actually you're repairing the muscle from the workout. You're not doing muscle hypertrophy, so you wouldn't necessarily build it much.
If they're the same meal, do they just count as one?
What's that?
Say I had like 2 hits, but it was the same meal, does it just count as one?
I just write 2. Yeah, just write 2. Because we're going to see a couple of things. One is, are you having enough? And 2, are you using your budget properly? So using your budget properly means spreading the level rather than getting it all in one shot. What? Just going to do a quick... yeah, just map. So you have 3 hits already. So you have like 4 good hits. So the way we're going to look at a hit is if you had 1 or higher, that's a hit. But I want to see how many hits you have separately. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, because when you do 1 hit, let's say if you had 2 cell-phones in 1, your muscle is just going to speed up at the same pace. It's not going to get any faster. But that reaction is only going to last for 3 hours. So we want to know if you're actually hitting it 6 times, like over 12 hours, because then that's how your muscles are really going to go into ramp mode and just repair itself. Cool. If you do muscle hypertrophy, so you had 3 hits? Mostly with your So most people will have 3 at least, just because of ideas. But I want to know if you're having 4 or 5 through a good protein hit between you. So it looks like everyone's in the 3. How about you guys?
Cheating on me?
5? How about you guys?
We went to a buffet yesterday. Yeah.
Like late night buffets?
Yeah, all of us.
But that's the whole point.
Alex, you have 1.
You guys had 3 or
I had 4 hits. I had 6.
Kyle had 1 hit.
Huh?
You have 1 hit.
4 separate hits? Oh, 4 separate.
4. I only had protein
How about you guys? 3 separate?
and ice cream.
Okay, but I got 1.
Kyle, you didn't even eat food. How thirsty are you?
That was you.
No, you're
This guy only had cupcakes.
I know.
Yeah.